You are spot on with respect to how detrimental the student loan debt crisis has become over the past decade or plus. Over the past 20 to 25 years, college tuition has tripled, student loan has doubled, and it is crushing the futures of not only our students, but our communities.
This is Dr. Rob Harter with the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast, Making Your World Better. What does it take to be an effective nonprofit leader today? What are the biggest challenges? What are the biggest obstacles? How should nonprofits fundraise in an economy that is constantly changing? All of these reasons combined led me to start this show. And it's my hope that through this series, people can learn not only what it takes to be an effective nonprofit organization, but to hear from effective leaders who are successfully making a positive impact in their communities. We hope you enjoy the show, as together we hear how they are making their world better.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast with Rob Harter. I'm Mike Lee. I live in Washington, D.C., and I'm a listener just like you. We are all on a leadership journey, looking for ways to learn and grow. Each week, I look forward to hearing Rob's latest discussion with his guests. I invite you to join us. Thanks for listening. Now here's Rob.
This podcast is sponsored by DonorBox. DonorBox, helping you help others with the best donation forms in the business. Well, welcome back to the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast. So glad to have Jay Williams here in the studio today. Jay, thanks so much for joining us today.
Rob, thank you for having me. I am excited to be here with you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, it's always been fun when I kick off these episodes. Each time I give my guests an opportunity to share a bit about their background and what got them to this point of where they are. And then we're going to, of course, dive in quite a bit to what you're doing now as president and CEO. But maybe give us just a bit of your journey today to launch things off.
Happy to do that. Well, I'm originally from Youngstown, Ohio, a city in Northeast Ohio with a history of being a steel town. Youngstown is where I was forged and raised, and started off my career in banking during my time in college, and went from just sort of a part-time teller banking position, moving up through the ranks and becoming a banker who appreciated the relationships and what community financial institutions can do. I thought that early in my career, I wanted to be a bank president. As I came to learn, I did not want to wait 30 or 40 years for that to happen. So I went from banking into bank regulating at the Federal Reserve System, thought that would give me a better understanding and a thorough view of the financial institutions, which it did. Long story short, got back into local banking. And as banking began to change in the late 90s and move from relationship community banking to so larger commercial and underwriting, it was less appealing to me. So I left the bank to go get into public service. I went to work for the city of Youngstown, again, in a capacity that was going to help me revitalize and help be involved in economic and community development, because that became a passion of mine, public service. One thing led to another, and I found myself in the race for mayor of the city of Youngstown. Never held political office, but it was a pivotal time in Youngstown's history. So as a political neophyte, I threw my hat in the ring and ultimately ended up winning as mayor of the city of Youngstown. I was the first African-American and the youngest to ever hold that office. And that started I appreciate it. That started really and cemented my journey into public service, which ultimately took me to Washington, D.C. to serve in the Obama administration in a variety of capacities, always, though, with an eye toward economic and community development. So the Auto Recovery Office, I spent some time in the White House, and I spent some time as the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development. So I ran EDA. All of these things then, I think, were a part of the narrative in the chapter writing that led me to my current position, which is President and CEO of the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation, a large community foundation serving 29 towns in central Connecticut. But I say all that to say that in each of my previous positions, there was an intersection with philanthropy and nonprofit organizations. So as the organization was doing its CEO search, the board was looking for someone with community and economic development experience, which I had, to then marry that with philanthropy. And I couldn't have written a greater and more gratifying opportunity, which now, after 9 years, I sit here at the helm of this wonderful organization with colleagues and partners in the communities that we serve who are second to none. So that was sort of a journey that led me to where I am today.
Yeah. Wow. What I love hearing people's stories and what a journey you've had. I mean, you've been all over the place. Yeah. From small town mayor. Well, Youngstown's a pretty good sized city. And
Yeah,
then to go to the White
mid-sized
House.
city. It's yeah, absolutely. It's been an humbling experience, and I've enjoyed every moment of it. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. And then now, yeah, here you are at the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. So you're the president and CEO, and we're going to dive in a bit because you do a lot of work and you end up impacting so many people's lives. And as you know, this not podcast is really about impacting others. And I'd say the majority of my listeners, from what I can tell, they're either executive directors of a nonprofit organization, they're maybe a development director, maybe they're part of the social impact arm of a company. But the goal is, as you were saying earlier about your own journey, is really philanthropic work, giving back to communities, giving back to individuals. So let's talk a bit about that because your work is pretty fascinating. And so in your role there at the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation, your work especially focuses on these 5 key areas, and you call them your 5 strategic outcome areas. And that includes basic human needs, employment, thriving neighborhoods, civic resident engagement, and arts and culture. Maybe we can start, just tell us, why did you come up with those 5 and why focus on those 5?
That's a great question. So all of those 5 strategic areas really feed up to our mission. So let me start at the highest level. Our mission is really around putting philanthropy into action to help create lasting solutions, right, to improve the quality of life across all of our towns. We recognize after doing a deep dive of the quality of life indicators, the data that really speaks to the quality of life, whether it's in economics or education or neighborhoods, that we couldn't really get to that broader mission because there were so many inequities and disparities that existed specifically across the state of Connecticut, but more pronounced within our region, that we said that in order to get to that broader mission of philanthropic action and creating lasting solutions, let's identify and then call out and figure out what our role is through our partnerships with our nonprofits, the areas where those inequities and disparities exist. And how do we, in doing that, also increase social and economic mobility? And those 5 areas really emerge from data that was published by many of our partners, data that our own team began to analyze and underscore. And as you spoke of those 5 areas, each of those provided opportunities and tactics and strategies that we thought through our partnerships. And again, we always remind ourselves that the work that we do is really done through our nonprofit partners who are often on the front line. So, right, we do grant making, capacity building, convening, advocacy, public policy, but none of that happens without those frontline nonprofit partners. So, Rob, it was really through a deep data dive and analysis that those areas emerge as opportunities for us to exercise and bring to bear the resources and tools that we have as a nonprofit philanthropic organization, where we thought over the long run, we could have short-term, intermediate, and long-term impact. So that's how those areas emerge. And we think that it has been well received by our community, well received by our nonprofit partners, and underscoring that none of this we do alone, right?
I love that. Well, you've had such a wide range of experience, as you mentioned already. You've a very unique journey where you've done so many different things. And because of that, you've got this experience, as we've talked about in philanthropy. You were in the Commerce Department, you were at the White House. You've also seen some things like the student debt crisis up close and personal in terms of some of your work. Talk about that a little bit, because that's been one of the areas you talked about your scholarship before we hit record. This can really show up tangibly in local economies and workforce development when it comes to helping people get out of debt when it comes to school. Talk about that. Tell me why that's been a focus area and tell me some of the things you've done, because I think I just understood you've gotten some awards recently for that and your work there. So tell us about that.
Rob, you are spot on with respect to how detrimental the student loan debt crisis has become over the past decade or plus. Over the past 20 to 25 years, college tuition has tripled, student loan has doubled, and it is crushing the futures of not only our students, but our communities. So the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation, we've had a scholarship program for 60 years. That scholarship program was effective, and we were proud of it, but it was modest. It provided $3,000 a year. And with the cost of college, right, that barely covers books. So as we were contemplating our centennial anniversary, probably 3-4 years ago, we started thinking, and the board had charged us with really taking a look at the scholarship program and making sure it was relevant, making sure it was impactful. So the first thing we did was said, okay, well, $3,000 a year just isn't impactful when you think about the cost of higher education. So how can we first tweak that? And we thought about maybe tripling it. So, we're go from 3 to 10, triple plus. We're coming up on our 100th anniversary. It's a multiple, hundreds multiple of 10. So let's think about more money to try to address the problem. But then we also said that just didn't feel like enough. So long story short, we said college students not only have an issue with the costs and trying to defer the costs, but many of them need supports to really navigate into college, through college, and then get into their career. So we started looking around and decided to partner with one of our nonprofit organizations called Hartford Promise. Promise programs may be familiar to your listeners across the country. They start in Kalamazoo. They do wonderful things. But Hartford Promise was unique to us because not only did it provide a $5,000 scholarship to the students each year, up to 4 years, they provided wraparound services starting in ninth grade into college, helping them navigate all the things that first generation college students also, whether it's academic support, health support, support in terms of networks. So we said, boy, if we took our scholarship of maybe 10,000 and married it to their scholarship with their wraparound services, that sounded something appealing. But then we said we can do more. We decided to ultimately create a $20,000 scholarship at the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation, partner it with a $5,000 scholarship at Hartford Promise. So that was up to $25,000 a year, $100,000 over 4 years. We said, listen, that sounds better. $100,000 a year, $100,000 up to 4 years, 100th anniversary. And I'll end by saying we said we would marry that scholarship with their wraparound services. So at the end of the day, students who are Hartford Promise scholars can get up to $100,000. 94% of them, that means they can go to school debt free. They get 10 years of wraparound services. And what that amounts to are opportunities for them to graduate, to start businesses, purchase homes, give back to their community, and not have crushing student loan debt, which many studies have indicated limit the choices that they have. So we are excited about that. We put $20 million of our endowment behind that. We did a $10 million campaign, and that is starting to get some national traction and recognition that we're happy to talk about.
Well, I love that you've done that wraparound, approach because, and you already explained that really well, what that means. I know there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that provide that wraparound service approach, and I think that's really smart in this case. Maybe you could unpack a little bit even more. I love how you've really tackled an issue and decided, hey, 3,000 versus 25,000. There's a big difference, particularly when you stretch it over 4 years. What was it about when you did your research to realize this wasn't really moving the needle? In other words, students maybe were enrolling in college, but they weren't crossing the finish line. They weren't graduating. What were some of the things that you studied or just really stood out to you that made you say, okay, we've got to do something about this. Let's start investing in a large way, because that was a significant change in terms of the dollars that you're putting into this.
So we did our own analysis in addition to the studies, some of which were published by the federal government and student loan providers, our own interviews with the local higher educational institutions, students themselves. And what we saw was the only thing worse than graduating from college with a mound of student loan debt is not graduating, right? So many of these students would start college, to your point, and for a variety of reasons had trouble finishing, weren't completing their higher education. But those student loan debts were still coming due. So now you have $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 of student loan debt. You, for reasons of life challenges, problems that arise, you don't graduate. So your earning power is significantly inhibited. Your debt load is of a significant amount. And when you put those two things together, what we found is that can't be discharged in bankruptcy. And again, that's a path that some individuals find themselves taking, but it doesn't alleviate student loan debt. It precludes you from often being able to purchase a home or start a family or start a business. So where we also found is, based on the data that Hartford Promise shared with us, that 94+% of their students, had this program been in place, would have graduated from college debt-free. So, and we understand the college path is not for everyone. So we also have other supports that support careers and entrepreneurship and vocational training. But specifically around college, the data demonstrated again that 94% of the students could graduate debt-free, and those that had debt that exceeded $100,000, it would still be significantly less because of their ability to receive this $100,000. The studies further showed, and this was validated by the award we just received from Fast Company, that the economic impact that this has. So the Greater Future Scholarship Partnership with Hartford Promise was awarded and recognized as one of the top 10 most economically impactful and innovative economic development impact programs across the country, because it recognizes now that each year you have dozens and dozens and ultimately hundreds of students who are graduating without debt, who can now contribute to the economic benefit and well-being of their communities in ways that otherwise would have been inhibited. So it was really the studies that demonstrated how debt inhibits choices, how lack of debt provides greater opportunity, and then the power of those individuals, both in terms of their earning potential and then not having that student debt load, really is a significant benefit over the course of time for the communities in which they reside.
Now, I'm really impressed with that. And my guess is, as I'm hearing this, it occurs to me that you've had to learn how to really work well with government and nonprofits and business and foundations, and philanthropy involves all of those different factors. And of course, I've talked to a lot of people on the show, and I'm just a big believer in collaboration. And I feel like the nonprofit organizations that really do well, they collaborate well. And of course, you've been a mayor before, so you had great experience doing that. Maybe if, say, a mayor's listening, or another nonprofit leader or a foundation leader, someone's looking to invest in a really good mission-driven organization that's doing some similar things that you're talking about, how did you go about bringing this collaboration for, now you've talked about, of course, the scholarship and helping this wraparound services for students. What was your success rate in terms of bringing different parties together, whether it be government, for-profit, nonprofit? It seems like you've been really successful for that. How have you done that? Like, what did you do to make that work so well?
That's a great question. And we understand that both public organizations, whether it's government or corporations, want to invest in things that work, right? You'll get very little argument about investing in the future of our young people. People also understand that education is a path to do that. So part of what we had to do is we needed to acknowledge that there, yes, is a crisis in the cost of higher education. So we didn't ignore that. But what we said is, while we still have to address the crisis in higher education costs, let's not be forgetful of the students who are still on those pathways. So let's, to a certain extent, tackle this from both ends. So from the public policy standpoint, we don't want to let players off the hook who are just not being conscientious about the skyrocketing spiral cost of higher ed. Because some businesses were like, well, we don't want to just sort of endorse the cost of higher education going up and up and up by pouring money into it. We said, we get you. But what we also said is, by having a scholarship that benefits students, who give those students choices, and the vast majority of them, again, go to colleges that are well within the reach of the scholarship, we also are able to demonstrate to businesses that this is in your own interest, right, to partner with us, because these are your future employees. 75% of them either stay in the state of Connecticut or return to the state of Connecticut. So for those that don't, we want them to have those choices. When these individuals graduate debt-free and skilled, the opportunity for you to employ them or to provide training for them, to partner with them even before they graduate, to provide those internships, was very appealing. So that's where we got some favorable corporate response. From the public sector, we said, listen, the public sector, whether it's the state or the cities, you're investing significantly in education. We know there are a lot of challenges and problems that remain. We're not trying to tackle them all, but what we can do is, with $20 million of endowment resources plus a $10 million campaign. We had never done a campaign in the history of the organization. And we said our first campaign is going to be around this. You can take a modest public investment and leverage that multiple times over with private dollars. So that was appealing to the public sector, because they're like, okay, we always talk about public-private partnership, but we've got corporations and a nonprofit organization willing to put money on the table first to try to attract that public investment. So it was really about demonstrating that we're going to do this incrementally, that this has a benefit to the students, it has an economic benefit to the communities. And right, there are still naysayers and critics, and there are still cynics, and we get that. But when we were able to share this, and then the students and their families themselves talked about the impact that this had on their choices, even in the short term, it was very appealing. And we were thrilled and humbled with those early adopters who were willing to sort of invest in this program with us.
We'll be right back. Are you looking for an easy and effective way to boost your nonprofit's donations? Well, look no further than DonorBox. the online fundraising platform that streamlines your fundraising efforts, maximizes donations, and simplifies giving for your supporters. With DonorBox, you can create beautiful donation forms, accept digital wallet payments, track donations, and send auto receipts. And the best part? There are no setup or monthly fees and no long-term contracts required. So what are you waiting for? Visit donorbox.org today to get started. That is www.donorbox.org. Well done on that. And again, the results are already, to me, showing that you've been successful in bringing those different groups together, keeping the mission strong. And again, at the end of the day, really helping students get out of that debt and then doing it in a way with the wraparound services, like perfect, to me, combination. So let's go a little personal in terms of your own leadership style. You've had lots of different experience. Talk about your experience now with this foundation. The last 9 years, you mentioned you've been there. What has surprised you? What are the things that really has gotten you excited? And then as you think about even the future, what keeps you excited about sitting in this role and all the impact that you can have?
One of the things that I learned early on in leadership is one of the most important decisions any leader will make is who you choose to surround yourself with. I tell my staff that if during every discussion and every problem that arises, if I'm the smartest one in the room, there is something wrong. There's
Right,
absolutely
good.
something wrong.
That's good.
The things that I know well, and I want to bring my best to the circumstance. But as a leader, you also want people who are proficient, who are innovative and talented at what they do. And as a leader, my job is to bring those people together, at times get out of their way when that's necessary, try to make sure that at the end of the day, everyone can bring their best self. So I think that's one of the things that I am just so pleased with the colleagues that I have the opportunity and the privilege to work with, those who are on my executive leadership team, those who are in leadership positions, all of the colleagues. We talk about leadership and that's important, but it's not necessarily vested in your title or your tenure. And I think that's the other thing is creating a collaborative environment where people understand and are supported in taking informed risk, that they understand that no matter how long you've been here or where you happen to sit in the organization, your contributions are welcomed. And over the course of these 9 years, just to see the support that we've had from our board, the support that we continue to get from our donors, those who are with us today and those who trusted this organization in its stewardship in years past, I think it's really just to me, has been one of the most gratifying experiences. And again, it was an honor to be elected mayor of my hometown, the first African-American, the youngest. It was an honor and a thrill to work in the White House in Washington, D.C. But when I take all of those things and think about what has happened with my colleagues and team over the last 9 years and the impact that we've been able to have and continue to have on the communities that we serve and the nonprofits that we partner with, I'm excited every day about the work, right? Not every day is a great day and not every day do things go right, but I would not trade this experience for anything. And to me, it's really just about the people, the talent, the passion, and the commitment that they all have to the work that we're doing.
I love that. Well, again, you've had so many experiences, like you mentioned, and the fact that you're in a place where you just really are thriving. You'll enjoy the people you work with. You've built a good culture, it sounds like. Tell me a little bit more about who shaped you as a leader and what are some of the most important things that shape you now as you continue to lead. Tell us a bit about your leadership style, I guess, and where you've come from and how you lead.
Well, the two most impactful people start with my parents, right? My mother and father, both who had some college, but were not college graduates, but who instilled in my sister and I early on about service to one's community, service to to others, who both lived lives that gave us inspiration, who also, said, hey, learn from the things that they would have done better. And so I think that was where it started for me. Another individual after my parents is a former pastor of mine, the late Bishop Norman L. Wagner, who really had a very strong impact in terms of both my faith is a defining part of who I am, along with his leadership and watching him. And I remember early on, one of the things that I remember him saying was that significance is paramount to success. There's nothing wrong with being successful. People pursue success. But if it's success for the sake of success, he said, that's not he said, it's more important to be significant in whatever you're doing, because there are a lot of people who are successful, as you might define that, but you would ask yourself, have they made a significant contribution to their community, to their organization? And there are a lot of people who you might not in the traditional way say, I wouldn't define them as successful, but the significance of their work, the significance of their contribution. So those individuals, along with a host of coaches and teachers and others who sometimes just it was a brief interaction that left an imprint, and others who have, helped me along the way. And I think the other thing that I like to look at are what are things you can take away. I think are always opportunities or lessons, both good and bad, to take away from people that you meet, people that you read about. I'm curious. I love to ask questions and sort of try to figure out why did this work the way it did or why didn't it work. So it has just been, I think, a life of curiosity. I've been blessed to have people invest in me and trust me. You also learn that, as a public figure, when you're elected office, you own your mistakes, right? A success is a shared success among the team. And at the end of the day, you take accountability when things don't go well, whether it's because it's a decision you made or ultimately something that was under your purview or you're responsible for. And that's not always easy. It's not always pleasant, but one of the things I've learned are people, when you take responsibility for things under your leadership, that comes with the territory, and people will forgive and respect you for that. And to me, that's a powerful lesson that we don't see enough of today.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Love hearing too. From the very beginning, your mom and dad really shaped you as a leader. I think that's wonderful. I've heard that from many of my guests on the show. Talk about their mom or dad or both have shaped them as leaders. I think it's a wonderful thing. Okay, so as you look back at the foundation now, and you think about scaling, because I know you've experienced a lot of growth, and I'm assuming you're anticipating more growth. As you think about scaling, what are the things you're most excited about the foundation specifically? And what are those things that are a little bit more uncertain or unresolved, maybe because of the environment that we're living in now and the economic uncertainty that we live in? Maybe you could speak to that.
Great question. So excited about a number of things. One of the things that we also announced is that after 20 years in our current location, we have announced that we're going to our headquarters in a community development project in a neighborhood that is undergoing a transitional renaissance in the north end of the city of Hartford. We sit on the 7th and 8th floor of an office tower with great views, but as a community foundation, we think that literally, figuratively, we belong on the ground, shoulder to shoulder next to the stakeholders. So excited about moving that project forward, which is going to be a couple of years in the making. And the impact that it's not just our office, right? This is going to be a place to convene nonprofits, to place to engage with neighborhood community groups. We think it's going to be a catalytic economic impact. So that's exciting. Amongst, again, the continued growth of our scholarships and our new brand and our new relationships, things that are of concern. You hit the nail on the head when you think about this current fiscal federal policy environment that we are in, having spent 6 years in Washington, D.C., having spent 6 years in elected office, knowing how that philanthropic resources will never, ever be able to fill the gaps that we're seeing with the retreat of some of the public investment. I am all for efficiency and making sure that we use public dollars, judiciously and are good stewards of those dollars. But what, in my opinion, what we're seeing now is just a malicious attack and assault on things that are the social safety net, right? Things that are just make up and strengthen the fabric of our democracy. And that's concerning because no amount of philanthropic resources are going to be able to undo some of the damage. So we're trying to figure out how we can strengthen and how we can defend the philanthropic sector, how we can have public policy that doesn't, again, get into the partisan battles. I've been there, right? So there's a time and a place for ideological debate and partisan battles, but it is not at the cost and the expense of the well-being of vulnerable communities. I mean, that to me is something that as philanthropic organizations, as nonprofit organizations, I hope that we can say there needs to be a line that is drawn in the sand that we advocate public policy for public resources that provide a safety net. We can then have other debates about policies and things like that. So that is a significant concern because on top of, the natural things that can occur, we saw what happened with the global pandemic a few years ago with COVID, and we saw what happened with the mortgage crisis and things like that. So the unknown on top of what we're seeing from a policy environment is of great concern to myself and my colleagues and many of our partners across the field.
No, well, thanks for sharing that. And I think I share that. And I think almost every guest I've had on the show shares that same concern. I think we're living in very unusual times in the sense that, yeah, there's this combination of the economy is really struggling and things are more expensive. Plus then, yeah, on the federal level, when a lot of nonprofits depend on federal grants, has been just slashed. A lot of social programs have been slashed. All these things are happening at the same time. So it has created a tremendous amount of uncertainty, as you mentioned. So anyway, thanks for sharing. I think for my listeners who are hearing you and hearing a bit of your story, they probably want to connect with you. What's the best way for them to get to know you a little bit and connect with the foundation?
Sure. I would say our website, Greater Hartford Gives .org, Greater Hartford Gives with an S.org is the best way. Our social media channels. So this is where I date myself. I'm a kid born in the 70s, came up in the 80s and 90s. So, I think website and some of my staff is like, Jay, it's LinkedIn. It's, not even Facebook anymore. It's Instagram. You have to make sure you get all the social media handles. So all of those
Yep.
things are on. But if you put in Greater Hartford Gives, you will find our LinkedIn, you will find our Instagram, you will find our Facebook, you will find our website. In doing that with this new brand, there is just really an opportunity for the community and stakeholders and those who are interested to get to know who we are. And it's a two-way street, right? We are always eager and interested to learn from others and to make connections. Yes, we are geographically based in central Connecticut, but we have partnerships with community foundations across the country. So always happy to learn from others, to hear opportunities of how we can collaborate, things that work here in Greater Hartford. We would love to say, hey, maybe that model works there. And if you got something working, in your area across the country, we'd be also happy to hear about that.
Well, congrats on your success and thanks for all you're doing to really bolster the social safety net, right? And to provide so many good offerings, including the scholarship that you mentioned. But thanks for taking also time on the show to share your insights, share some of your experience, and share a bit of your story. Really appreciate you having on the show.
Rob, thank you for your platform for nonprofit leadership. It is something that is critical, and what you bring to this in terms of these conversations and your guests is invaluable. So thank you.
You bet. Oh, thank you so much. And then for my listeners, thanks for tuning in. And I encourage you to check out the show notes. There's gonna be a lot more information about Jay and the work he's doing at the foundation. So please check that out. And as always, love having you tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Hey friends, well, I wanted you to know that this podcast can be found on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, Google Podcasts, and wherever you listen to other podcasts. I also want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with others. This will actually help us get this great content out to more nonprofit leaders just like you. You can also join the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast community, find other resources and interviews of past guests, all on my website, nonprofitleadershippodcast.org. Well, thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep making your world better. This podcast is sponsored by DonorBox. DonorBox, helping you help others with the best donation forms in the business.